Hi, welcome back to the channel. The ceasefire between the USA and Iran is now into its second day, but despite the pause in direct military action, the global economic fallout is still intensifying. What we're seeing now is a market that's trying to price in two completely different realities at the same time. On the one hand, there's relief that the bombing has stopped for now. On the other, there's growing concern that this ceasefire is extremely fragile and could collapse very quickly. And that uncertainty is already feeding through into oil prices, gas prices, shipping costs, insurance premiums, inflation expectations, and global supply chains. So in today's video, I want to walk you through exactly what's happening, what the risks are over the next couple of weeks, and why, even if this ceasefire holds, the damage that has already been done is likely to continue feeding through into the global economy for many months. Because make no mistake about it, this crisis is far from over. But before we get into the details of all of that, could I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscribe button? It only takes you a second and it really helps with the algorithm, also puts a smile on my face. The biggest issue right now remains the Strait of Hormuz. This is one of the most important shipping routes in the world, with roughly around 20% of all global oil consumption passing through it on a daily basis. Well, it was passing through it on a daily basis, it's not now. And there is also huge volumes of liquefied natural gas that go through there, and those supplies are heading to Europe and Asia, where they're needed for at least making electricity, but also industrial purposes. And although the ceasefire has reduced the immediate military threat, Iran has continued to use the strait as leverage. There are widespread reports that Tehran is considering some form of transit charge or toll on ships moving through the waterway. Now, some figures being discussed suggest that Iran is looking to impose a charge of $2 million per vessel. If that was implemented on a large scale for every single vessel, with well over 100 ships passing through the strait on a normal day, we would be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in daily costs for shipping companies, oil traders, and ultimately consumers, because those costs will be passed on. Now, whether that exact figure is realistic or not remains to be seen. But the key point here is this: even the threat of disruption is enough to send costs soaring. Shipping companies don't wait until the route has been fully blocked or the toll has been put in place. They respond immediately by increasing insurance premiums, rerouting cargo, reducing sailings, and charging more. And that's exactly what we are seeing right now. Traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has fallen by more than 100 ships per day since this conflict began. At the same time, Brent crude prices have risen by more than 30% against pre-war levels and are up by around 50% against where we were at the start of 2026. US gasoline prices are up by more than a third. European benchmark natural gas has surged by over 40%. And yet, interestingly, global stock markets are only down by around 2%. So that math really doesn't add up. And it tells you something very clear. Equity markets are still pricing in the hope that this crisis will be contained. But energy markets and shipping markets are telling a very different story. They are pricing in real disruption, real shortages, and real risk. And that matters because Europe is still heavily exposed to imported liquefied natural gas, particularly after reducing Russian pipeline gas dependency as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So even though there is technically a ceasefire in place, energy markets are still behaving as if there's a serious ongoing supply risk. Oil prices are still sitting at around $100 per barrel. And that risk has actually worsened because Saudi Arabia has now confirmed that the recent attacks on its energy infrastructure have reduced oil production capacity in the country by around 600,000 barrels per day. In addition, throughput on one of its key pipelines have also been reduced. Now, this is hugely significant because Saudi Arabia's westbound export route is one of the main alternative routes used to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. So you can see how the pieces of the jigsaw are now fitting together. It's been reported that the pipeline damage could actually reduce the flow of oil by 700,000 barrels per day. So at the exact moment the world needs alternative supply routes to reduce pressure, one of the most important backup systems has been hit. That creates a double shock. First, you have direct production losses. Second, you have reduced transport flexibility, and together that means less oil reaching the market, tighter inventories and higher prices. This is why I've been saying for the last few days that even if the missiles stop flying, the economic consequences don't just disappear overnight. Oil doesn't instantly come back. Refineries don't instantly restart and repair themselves. Shipping routes don't suddenly become risk-free. Insurance doesn't suddenly fall. And all of this takes time and costs money. And in the meantime, these higher costs are feeding into the price of everything. Fuel prices are rising, transport costs are rising, food distribution costs are going up, manufacturing input prices are going up, airline ticket prices are rising, and central banks suddenly have a new inflation problem on their hands. And that's why what happens next is so important. Donald Trump has now stepped up the pressure on Iran. He's issued a post on Truth Social that says Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonourable some would say, of allowing oil to flow freely through the Strait of Hormuz. Now he said this was not in the agreement that had been reached. That's important because it shows Washington's patience may already be starting to wear thin with Iran. And that raises the risk that if Iran does try to impose restrictions, delays or charges on shipping, the US could revert to military action far more quickly than many markets are currently expecting. So what we now have is a situation where the ceasefire exists, but one of the central economic flashpoints of the war remains unresolved. And that means markets are still extremely nervous. Now, alongside this, there are also wider geopolitical risks that could still derail the talks. One major issue is Lebanon. Israel has indicated that it is prepared to hold talks aimed at reducing tensions on its northern border. That sounds positive on the face of it. However, strikes have continued in the region, and that creates a real risk that the conflict broadens again. There are also reports overnight of drone incidents and heightened regional security alerts in Gulf states, including Kuwait. At this stage, there's still a lot of uncertainty around attribution and exactly what happens, so it's important not to jump to conclusions too quickly. But what it does tell us is that the region remains highly unstable. Even if Iran and the USA can agree something in principle over the next few days, there are still many moving parts to this story. You've got Lebanon, you've got Hezbollah, you've got Gulf infrastructure, you've got the shipping route issue, and of course, you've still got the core dispute over Iran's nuclear program. That issue has not gone away. Iran's new leadership is also continuing to project strength domestically. Recent statements coming out of Tehran make it clear that Iran does not see itself as having lost this conflict. Instead, the messaging is that the country resisted Western pressure, survived the attacks and maintained leverage over global energy markets. That matters because it makes a compromise harder. If both sides are telling their domestic audiences that they are winning, it becomes politically much more difficult to make the concessions needed for a lasting settlement. So where does all of this leave us? Well, in the short term, markets are likely to remain extremely sensitive. If the talks over the weekend make progress, we could see some relief, oil prices could ease, shipping flows could recover, gas prices could come back down. But even in that best case scenario, some of the damage is already locked in. Higher energy prices over the last few weeks will feed through into inflation data over the coming months. Businesses have paid higher shipping costs, won't get that back. Consumers will still feel the squeeze. And central banks will have to factor all of this into their interest rate decisions. So yes, the ceasefire is good news, but it's not a permanent resolution. The risks remain very real, and the economic consequences of this conflict are already spreading far beyond the Middle East. So that's why the next 14 days are so critical, because this is not just about whether the ceasefire holds, it's about whether the world can avoid a second wave of economic disruption on top of the damage that's already been done. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments as and when they occur. Hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, or maybe you didn't like it, but you thought it was interesting, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or cash alternative prize. Please scan the QR code on the screen now. Click the link in the description below if you'd like to get involved in that. It's another way of funding the channel. Thank you also to everyone that's supported me in other ways. If you bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you so much. Really do appreciate that support. As you may be aware, I recently launched a new channel with my friend Naz. It's called Joe and Naz. And we've just released our latest video where we went to try one of the best burgers in the world according to the Burger Dudes, who publish an annual list of the world's best burgers. Please go and check out that video. We need your support. While you're over there, if you could subscribe, watch a few of the videos, let us know what you think, drop us a few comments, that would be absolutely fantastic. These videos are a bit of fun. We're introducing a bit of humour and entertainment into our food reviews, so hopefully they will put a smile on your face. You can find a link at the end of today's video that will take you straight through to that burger video. Thank you so much for watching, and here's something else that will also put a smile on your face.